God puts us in nations, in places, not by mistake, but to do a job. What if we opened our eyes to the needs of our colleagues, of our leaders, of our subordinates, and we were a priest on their behalf? Welcome to the Repurposing Business Podcast. My name is Brett Johnson.
And I'm Len Johnson.
And we're going to be talking about how to get our business into God's business. Our subtext is Let My Business Go, and we'll have guests from around the world. So thank you for joining us this week and every week on the Repurposing Business Podcast. So welcome to the Repurposing Business Podcast. My name is Brett Johnson, and I'm delighted to have Sarah Lynn here. Sarah, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. Appreciate it.
I think this is the day of the dueling clear-rimmed frames, I think it is, something like that. Yeah.
We planned the matching.
Yeah. Sarah, so good to have you here. And you've got such an amazing journey, and I'm sure it's going to be an encouragement. And up until about a month ago, it would have been easy for me to introduce you, but you are still the founder of EllieFunday, and we're going to get to that story in a moment. And that's like a social entrepreneurial endeavor tackling big international problems, I think you could safely say. Yep. But you didn't begin there, right? Why don't you take us a bit back in your journey and tell us where you grew up and your early career, and we'll get into some of your career transitions.
Got it. Yep. Well, I grew up in a really challenging place called Honolulu, Hawaii, and on the beaches of Hawaii. And I grew up there in my childhood, and then my family moved out to California when I was in junior high. And I did my undergraduate schooling at UC Davis in psychology. And so I thought I would go and become a social worker. That's really where my heart started. And I worked in the Tenderloin, which is equivalent to like the red light district in San Francisco, for about half a year. And that's really when God opened up my eyes to the poor and the systemic issues at hand. And it was entirely eye-opening to me. As you could see, the contrast from growing up in a very safe environment like Honolulu, Hawaii, into a really challenged environment. And I think that God just like blew my eyes open. And I think that that's really where my heart started to open up for those that were disenfranchised, that really did not have the same means and the safe upbringing that I had. And so I think that God really knew what he's doing early on, which I really didn't. And so I did that for half a year, mainly because the other thing that really resonated deeply within me was like, I have a very strong artistic inclination to want to make beautiful things. And so I knew that I needed to explore that side of who I am. And so I went back to design school, actually, to explore that side. As a good Asian child, I did the prerequisites of a biology, psychology degree, but I came out of it saying I really needed to honor the other side of who I am and to really dig into the artistic side of what I wanted to do. So I went back to school for graphic design. Actually. So, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Wow. So social work to graphic design. I presume you met Elton when you were at UC Davis. Is that right?
Yes. We met at UC Davis. He's 3 years older than I am. And yes, definitely. We met later in our years there. So,
yeah. Okay, great. Fantastic. So then did you work in design?
Yeah, I did. So after I graduated with a design certificate, my husband, Elton, and I, we got married and moved out to Chicago while he did his graduate studies. And so I started working at design firm early on. First design firm I worked at actually was doing stuff for VeggieTales. Some of you might know what VeggieTales is. Yeah. So I did like designing magazines and VBS materials for them. And then from there, I started working in larger design agencies where I started working with financial institutions and alongside of other Fortune 500s as well.
Fantastic. So now I presume your parents were happy. You had a good job. You were doing things, and then you got another crazy idea. What was that?
I hit a point in my career where I was a little bit, I guess the best word is jaded with how corporations was using marketing. A
Mhm.
lot of it had to do with not necessarily being true to what they were trying to advertise. And I was working for a large grocery store chain, and I was working on their corporate social responsibility report. And so what they were trying to project to their investors was not necessarily what was happening at the core of who they were. And so that really made me think twice about, how do I want to continue on with the skill set that I have? Because I feel as if marketing and design can be used for good. And so I started praying and asking the Lord, Lord, how do you want to position me into a place where
Mhm.
I still felt very strongly about helping the disenfranchised and the economic poor? And so I just started praying and asking him to show me what that looked like.
Yeah.
And he started opening up my eyes to different things. So, but yeah.
Yeah. So it's a great prayer to pray. Just, okay, God, I've got this competence in design, but I've got this passion to make a difference in the life of the disenfranchised. And so did you come up with something at the intersection of those two things? Is that what happened?
Well, I'll be honest with you. I don't know if coming up with, I think following God is a little bit of he feeds you little, I think, niblets of where I can be going. Cause I wish that I had this grand plan, but I really didn't.
Yeah.
And I think the first question that I asked him was, Lord, you know that I like to make physical products, and you know that I like craft, and I really feel strongly about working with women that have faced some form of trafficking or abuse. And so those are the things that I knew. I said, okay, at least lead me to those places. And so the first thing I said, okay, a product. It needed to be a product that I really loved. And it came back to my own baby blanket. So we started with a baby blanket. And in regards to disenfranchised people, Elton, my husband, was visiting a group in India that works specifically with the untouchables there. And so I visited with him the second time around and just learned about the atrocities that they face. And that entirely, again, broke my heart and world again. And so those were the little steps that God put, in my, I think my story when I look at it. And from there is just one little step after the other. So.
Yeah, so the stories are often clearer looking back than looking forward. So
Absolutely.
looking forward, you were just following the breadcrumbs, right? Just what's the next step? What's the next step? But you were asking the right questions, right? In terms of you had a passion for, or you cared about things that God cared about, but you weren't quite sure how it was going to work out. So you settled on a baby blanket, and then you got the women in India to make them. Is that what happened?
Yeah, in a nutshell, we worked with a sewing unit that specifically works with women that have had some form of domestic violence and abuse in southern India. So it started there. And we started from scratch, basically. I didn't know anything about building a supply chain. I didn't know anything about fabric production. I was learning as I was going at the same time. I was taking fashion design classes and textiles. So whatever I was learning, I was applying immediately, which actually I really love how I could do that. It's much more, I think, obviously it sticks with you much more. And so, and if I look back at it, it was crazy. I think it is a little bit of crazy because no one that I know now in the fashion industry is like, oh, build a supply chain from scratch and a brand. And God somehow provided. I know that we were looking for a lot of things that are seemingly impossible, like organic textile manufacturing is really challenging because a lot of the futures of organic cotton is purchased by the large industries like Walmart, and so we're competing against them. And so to find a small manufacturer that's willing to bet on a brand that has no traction or any customers was a big needle in the haystack that God provided, which is really amazing.
So fantastic. So you had to come up with a concept, come up with a product, come up with a brand that would be attractive to first world, if you like, buyers, and then find majority world or developing world people. And how about their skill sets? What happened there in terms of developing the supply side? So I presume that the people on the ground weren't ready to run in terms of making the stuff that you needed for the US market.
Yeah, I had to be on ground in India for some time, mainly because we needed to work on the quality control aspect. The women had basic skills in regards to sewing, but not necessarily export quality skills. And so we needed to develop processes in place so that they could make sure that we made blankets that were actually of the highest quality so that our reputation would be good as well. And I remember like the first time we shipped our blankets, our defect rate was at 50%. And I was like crying. It's terrible. And we needed to wash everything, fix everything. But in hindsight, I should have prepared myself. I think that anytime you do something, brand new or in the beginning, there's going to be roadblocks and challenges. And so I think that like our quality limit is amazing now. We're at like 2% defect. And so, yeah, this is amazing to see how far they've come.
That's amazing. Yeah, that is quite a challenge, because I think I've seen many, many people over the years thinking, oh, I'm going to get bags out of Malawi, or I'm going to get this craft out of South America, or this thing out of India, and it's cheap, so the people in America will buy it. But that wasn't your value proposition. You were making something high quality.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that at the core mindset of creation, I think that when you make quality, it values the person. Yeah. And when we spoke to our artists, we said, you are valuable and that you have the ability to make beautiful things. And we didn't want to stress that, if you made it wrong, that is some sort of internal, defect with what you had. But it's more so, we always talked about like, you have the ability to make something beautiful. You're representing, yourself and your people. And there's a sense of pride, I think, when the women can say, yeah, we made something beautiful. Whenever we show them photos of the stores that they're in, they're like, I can't necessarily be there, but they say like, at least my work can be there. And so they're so proud when we could say they're at like the top stores, like they were in Barney's and in like Restoration Hardware and Nordstrom's. And so I'm so proud of them. I think that that's really a testimony to really valuing someone's worth and the work that they do. So,
yeah. Somebody asked me recently, so, if absent the Bible, how would you know what God is like? And I said, through his work products, right? So you can see what somebody is like through what they create. So what a wonderful thing that you could help them create something which put them on a shelf somewhere in the US, a place they could never go. Yeah, I love that. I love the notion of work being, there's an old Quaker saying, work is love made visible,
Oh, absolutely. I love what the Quakers do.
Yeah. So lovely. So you got this up and going. Now you've got, how many seamstresses did you have in India?
When we were in full production, we were working with close to over 60 seamstresses and 3 different groups throughout India, North India, and then Middle and then South India. And so we were making clothing, we were making toys, we were making blankets. And right before the pandemic hit, we launched like a women's line as well. So we're really moving forward and doing well. So
yeah, fantastic. And then came the coronavirus, the COVID-19 crisis. And recently in a class that I taught, one of the things, the first principle is God's people aren't exempt from the crisis. I mean, that's it's not like it hits some people and not other people. So you got impacted, right? Tell us what the impact was on your business.
Yeah, absolutely. I would say that retail obviously was hard hit globally, and our retailers had to shut down. So that impacted our buys. And it was spring, I think in March is when it really hit. And that was when we were ready to ship all of our new products. And so a lot of the buyers just said, okay, can you hold on the orders, or we didn't have anyone necessarily cancel. And so we were like, maybe they'll pick it up. But as time went on, we realized that, it's not going to continue. I mean, this is not going to get any better in the next 3 months. Then is when we started seeing all the cancellations happen. And then on the India side, India was also completely shut down, which affected the infrastructure and delivery process of the goods, and also the ability for our artisans to get to the sewing units to work. And so we're basically, pulled on both ends. Yeah, we're shut down on both ends. And so our team got together and said, okay, what do we need to do to continue to at least sustain us? And so when we prayed early on, God's like, make masks. And we're like, okay, this is before the government even talked about making masks. This is even before there was controversies about masks. And so we were early to the mask game. We made a pattern for the mask so that people could sew and make masks for themselves. And then we got a huge amount of requests to make them. And so we decided to start a US-based mask sewing operations in the middle of the pandemic. And so we hustled and we mobilized, I think, over 20 local seamstresses in the Bay Area that were like my pattern makers, my friends that were from sewing school, and friends and grandmas. And that was quite an ordeal, but that is what kept us alive for the first, I think, 3 months. And it really helped also provide for the community, because for every mask that was made, we donated one to a first line responder as well. So,
wow.
Yeah.
Wow. It's amazing. So that was a quick pivot, and just because God told you to do it.
Yeah. And I was like, okay, I can make a pattern. That's, one thing that I could do. And so when that started, this was really early on. Because we were so early, we got a lot of press for our masks. And so this is an all unpaid press. Like GQ magazine featured us, Men's Health, and like several other celebrities picked up on it. So we feel like really blessed that we were early. And I think that is really like God's doing in the end. And God's like, I do this. All right, we're going to jump on it. God said to do that. And so I think that was his blessing to see his miracle in that as well. So,
one of the things that I found working with people during the crisis is that the provision doesn't always look either as elegant or the way you would like it, And I'm reminded of Elijah when the ravens fed him in 1 Kings 17. There's a drought in the land because he prophesied a drought, funnily enough. So now he's reaping the consequences of his own prophecy. And so often we chase the ravens away, because it doesn't look like the provision we want. And my sister in South Africa, who's involved, she has a school and involved in a nonprofit. And very quickly, they were sewing for a local crafts market. And my mom was a seamstress and had run clothing factories. And they taught tons of people to sew. And immediately they went in and they switched into masks. And that paid their school teachers for months as they went their way through the pandemic and so forth. And they also got approved by the health department. So their masks were approved, and then kind of went from there, but also moved pretty quickly on that one. Yeah. So good for you on that. So how long did the mask making continue for, and take us forward on your EllieFunday journey?
Sure. We continued to make masks, and our demand soared because of all the press that we got. And so we actually worked with an LA manufacturer to help us to make more masks. But we knew that in time that the market would be quickly saturated, because everyone was, getting on this mask making demand. And so we started really praying and asking God, like, God, is this sustainable? Because everybody's is doing this. And at the same time, we didn't foresee the stores reopening quickly. When we were looking at some of the larger retailers, they're suffering the same way that we were. And those are indications of, indications of like how we should maybe be thinking about what we're doing next. I think so. It was in, I think, June or July where we really started thinking about what the future would look like in the next year. And a lot of our trade shows were going digital. And we didn't really feel like buyers would be buying because they had all this backstock in inventory. And a lot of our smaller mom and pops, they're pretty cash strapped. And so we didn't think that we would be able to sustain our operations for the next year. And so our team really thought long and hard about the consequences of hibernating the business indefinitely. And we use the term hibernation because there's a potential for coming out like winter, and like really thinking through and hunkering down, growing, resting, and praying through what's next. And as we talked to all of our advisors, including you, Brett, we really felt like it was maybe a good season to do that, because I've been running hard for the past 10 years. From the moment I wake up to the moment I sleep is all EllieFunday. And I really felt like I needed a sabbatical. And so we decided to put the business on hibernation. And at the same time, we said we're going to use EllieFunday's nonprofit, Handcrafted for Life, to raise funds to continue the work to sustain the artisans and the women that we work with. And so that was our decision back in July, I believe.
And well, how did it feel to you you're the founder of this thing and you've poured 10 years into it, and you started it out of a passion I mean, you might have not have had a download of a 10-year plan from God, but you had enough of the life of faith indicators that God was leading you to do this. And he'd done lots of miracles along the way. You'd had favor with amazing retailers. And I mean, you'd had mentorship and really, it seemed like God's smile was on the business. How did it feel to then kind of, I don't want to say kill the baby, but, certainly give it chloroform or something?
Oh, it was tough. It was really tough because we had our best show in February. We really had the best show in February. We had the largest amount of sales, amazing response. We just launched clothing, which the mothers love because people love their fabrics. It's all organic. And so that was where my heart was going. And I was like, okay, this is where I really felt like I was moving in stride. And I think that part of like putting this on hold was really like, this whole entire journey has been a faith walk, but I think that putting things on hibernation was really believing that God could raise something from the dead. And I think that's something that you said, Brett, earlier, is like, if God could raise Jesus from the dead, he could raise a company from the dead. Yeah. And that stuck with me. It's like, well, he's the one that started this. He's the one that gave it the wind. He's the one that gave it the resources. If he wants us to come out of hibernation, then he'll make it happen. And he'll make it even more glorious, the same way he made Jesus glorious when he rose from the dead. Yeah. And so I think that really stuck with me, that one little piece of advice. And it's hard because I think it is a large part of me is invested into this. This is my calling and purpose. And I don't see it as a career or like a job. This is something that I feel like I've embodied all my skills and talents into one place. And so people ask me, oh, what do you want to do next? Or what do you want to do? I was like, I've been doing what I love. And if I could continue to do it, I would. And so I think that that's the hardest thing, is that I really felt like I was in the right place and I was hitting stride. But to trust him in what's next, I think that seeing how he's delivered in the past has given me the comfort in knowing that whatever happens next, that he'll provide accordingly. So
yeah. Sarah, as you're speaking, I'm thinking about the 400 or so companies that we've worked with through the Repurposing Business Program since 2003. And we've recommended that one person sell and one person close down out of all of that. It's rare that we'll recommend a shutdown of a business because it's more than just a job. And the one who sold had bought the business without consulting God, and it was clearly a bad decision. And fortunately, there was a buyer to buy it out, and they moved on to do something else. And then, it's a tricky one. And I'm reminded of the scripture when the girl died, and the disciples came and said, "This kid is dead," and Jesus said, "No, she's just sleeping." And certainly Jesus was not deluded, but he saw a reality that was different from the reality that we see. And I like your point, remembering back to Abraham, credited as being the father of our faith because he believed that God is the God who gives life to the dead and calls things that are not as though they are. And yet it's tricky when you have to literally put the thing on life support or put the thing into an induced coma, because an induced coma, you don't know how long it's going to be for. No. And you also, this is part of the walk of faith. It's not a simple answer. It's not like, oh, God's promised me in January 1st, 2021 or whatever, this is all going to be fine. You don't really know.
Mm-hmm. I don't, but I'm learning to take it as a gift. I think it sounds really odd, but I think the one thing I've been asking for him was for a sabbatical. And maybe this is the gift that he's trying to give me right now. And I'm asking myself, when else can I take a break and to truly lean into him and to just have a good time with him? I think that's the biggest thing is I think that it's easy to get in this mode of I'm working with God, as opposed to I'm enjoying God and I'm being with him. And I think that that's what he's trying to teach me in this season. Like, how can I just enjoy him? And how can he just pour on me during this season? I think that's something that's easy to get caught up in, even as a faith-based entrepreneur. Is like, oh, I'm working with God and I'm doing something for him, as opposed to just enjoying him in this process. So, yeah.
I mean, often our identity is It's tied to output, but in Silicon Valley as well, there's kind of a badge of honor if you start something and it's successful. That's kind of like it's how you get your. In other parts of the world, it's like, do you drive a Mercedes and do you have a PhD or are you a director? Well, a lot of those things don't really count in Silicon Valley as much as did you start something? Did you get funding or did you get some traction, some momentum where you noticed? So it's an act of bravery to put something to sleep in a situation like that. So I commend you. Yeah.
Thank you.
And also this whole concept of, and we talk about rest as Christians, I rest. But actually underneath, it's like the duck on the water, underneath the feet is still going, And so learning to actually work from a place of rest is harder than we think it is, I find.
Absolutely. And I think that's something that I'm learning in this process. While I was working, it's like, oh, I wish I had more time to like paint or like do watercolors. It just seems like almost gluttonous to think, oh, I should be painting or, doing watercolors while I'm trying to run a business. But now that I've had the time to do it, I'm seeing the value in it, because as I'm painting, I'm actually like sensing his like value in me. And I'm noticing things in a different, like as I'm painting nature, like I notice things that I have not noticed before, or I'm noticing like the level of detail. And I think that just pulls me closer to like his level of creation and appreciation of it. And I think that I've never had time to stop. I think that's the biggest thing, and to work from a place of rest. But I feel like it's almost such a deep and rich experience for me as a designer, is I always pull from nature. And so I think the deeper I go into it, the deeper I see more of him. I think that's the value and the joy that I see in painting, even though I think before I was in my mindset is like, oh, painting is just for people that have tons of time. But I'm trying to see it as a purpose, like a soul care. I think that's the best way to put it is I think that it feeds my soul. And as a creative, I need, that creative soul I'm feeding too. So
God is actually doing for you what you've done for the women in India.
I'm hoping. Yeah, I'm hoping.
Well, seems to be the case, right?
Yeah.
There's that scripture that he who refreshes others will also be refreshed, or himself be refreshed. So you've refreshed. I mean, you just described what you did for the women in India, giving them, raising their level of dignity, which enables them to produce something. And it sounds like you're going through that in this time of rest, which is great.
Yeah, I think it's great. And I think what's really inspired and encouraged me is the women themselves have taken on their own initiatives. They've so they actually saw a need with schoolgirls in their community, and they knew that schoolgirls actually were given menstrual products through their schools. But when the schools shut down in India, they did not have access to them. And so the artisans there actually decided to say, hey, we have a lot of scrap fabric. Why don't we make reusable menstrual products for schoolgirls? And this was an initiative that they started themselves, which I'm so proud of. And they use the skill sets that we taught them and the quality control. And so I felt like that was probably not that my job is done, but I think that as a leader, you're like, when you're able to empower somebody to do something, you're hoping that they would continue the work. And I think that when I saw them do that, I think my heart was just so proud. I think that that was a very pivotal moment for me in this season. So.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. That is amazing. That's fantastic. So you've reproduced yourself. That's.
Yeah, I'm hoping. It's been amazing to see. It's been amazing to see. The ladies are so proud. They're training other women in the local community to actually educate on menstrual hygiene and health. And it's providing a pathway for the pastors' wives to connect with the surrounding neighbors and the people that are in need. And so I'm extremely proud of them. And so part of our initiative in Hibernation was actually to raise funding for them so that they could continue to empower their neighbors to distribute and make these menstrual products. And so it helps in threefold. The women that the artisans get to actually have an income. We're using, repurposing products and materials, and we're giving a pathway for the women and the pastors to actually go into their local communities and to actually like spread love and connect. So no, I'm super proud of them.
Yeah, because this isn't just a feminine hygiene issue. It knocks the girls out of school. It knocks them out of
Exactly.
circulation. It sets them back and all that kind of stuff. So this has big ramifications in their lives.
Yeah. And so I'm so happy that this was an initiative that they took on themselves, and I'm just walking alongside of them now. And I think that that's really our goal, is that we're never about telling them what to do. I think empowerment is really giving them the resources that they need to become who they are. And so I'm super proud of them.
So would you say, in a way, you're going through a repurposing of your own business?
I don't know. Probably. I feel like God's always doing something new. When I look at nature, there's always death and life. I think in death, there's life. And that's something that I've observed is that in order for something to grow, a seed needs to die. Mm-hmm. And so I am hopeful that whatever God is doing in the hibernation and death, that there's going to be life in new ways. And I think that he's trying to give me some fresh wind to see, things in a new perspective. So yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, fantastic. Good. And, God is good. So not everything goes bad at the same time necessarily. So Elton's business has been doing pretty well. So that's been a bit, at least an encouragement, because you both went through startups at the same time, which was a little bit crazy, right? Both of you doing it.
Right. We follow in our spiritual fathers and mothers' footsteps, Brett and Lynn. We started two companies at the same time, and one was birthed out of the necessity of the other. I think the way that Elton's business started was because we needed health insurance. He started to work for an educational coaching company to get insurance for us. And from there, he had a family friend of ours that said, we want to invest in you if you want to start your own company. And so it just started taking off from there. And now many parents need help with their kids and their college bound, essays. And so, yeah, it's definitely taking off.
Yeah. So what's gone down for you has gone up for him in an amazing way. Mm-hmm. So that has been a big encouragement, and it's great that you guys partner together, because he's a part of your business and you're a part of his business, and how you guys encourage each other. So it's good that you both have had something going, and it'll probably go in different seasons for both of you.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that there's a little bit of sadness, I think, that we both feel, mainly because we were used to working on businesses together. And so I think the other day Elton was saying, I'm really sad that we can't work on this together. But I feel like as you said, there's seasons to everything, and we'll figure it out. I think that I'll always be involved in his business and helping it with marketing and naming and branding as well. So,
we do put labels on our roles for each other in different situations. I mean, churches do it with the pastor's wife, or in a business, many businesses in Indonesia, the wife runs the finances, who actually means she runs the business and so forth. But companies need a father and a mother. That's what I found working with businesses, that many employees in a business need the assurance that there's a mom and a dad in the business. And so just that soft element, if you like, in and of itself is enough. It's value added enough, even if you don't do any marketing or you don't do other things.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that we both treat our companies like our families. All of our employees at EllieFunday, everyone calls us the EllieFunday family. I think that's what has been one of the greatest joys. I think a big sadness for me was to have to let go of my team, because we built an amazing team. And that in itself is a feat, especially in the Bay Area, where salaries are, extremely competitive, and to work for a social enterprise that could hardly pay you anything. I think that God really provided a good, strong, stable team where everybody really loved working together and got along. That's really, I think, a blessing in itself. So,
And I'm going to come back to another question, but that team itself, similar to what happened in India, some of them are spun off with their own enterprises, probably, which they would never have done if they hadn't had the years with you, right?
Yeah, my financial partner, Grace, she's my CFO, and I'm so proud of her. She's been my right-hand woman. She's the yin to my yang. Yeah. She started another mask company called Go Mask 2020, and she has connections in Vietnam, where she's able to import like large quantities of mass. And she's been able to work with churches and with nonprofits here. And so I'm super proud of her. It's like, I don't think that she would call herself an entrepreneur, but she definitely started another business in the middle of a pandemic. And so, yeah, definitely. So,
yeah. There was a recent study. They call them COVIDpreneurs.
Yeah.
And, there've been more businesses started. How many will actually get going? But out of, I think it's been like 3 or 4 times the normal number. I mean, it's just gone through the roof, business registration. So that's fantastic. Yeah.
There's definitely
so in many respects, the seed falling to the ground has produced both in India and on stateside in the US as well. Yeah. So Sarah Lynn, what are you doing to keep yourself encouraged? You're painting. What else are you doing to keep yourself encouraged in this season?
I love the water, and I live in California. And so I'm learning to surf is one thing. And this is something that I would never imagine myself to say. I think that somebody challenged me because I grew up in Honolulu. I've always wanted to surf, but left when I was too young. And now that I am in my 40s, it's like, oh, I'm too old to learn how to surf. But someone challenged me and said, you're never too old to learn anything. And I was like, you're right. You're so right. And so I'm like, what was stopping me? There is nothing. And so I am leaning into that. And I've gotten Grace and her family to learn how to surf as well, which is really fun. And I think that the crazy thing is I have this knack for finding the hardest thing to do and like going head on to the challenge. And surfing is one of the hardest sports to pick up. And I'm not sporty either, because surfing is often like entrepreneurship, where the conditions are always changing. The waves are never the same. And you never know what you're going to get. And so I'm like, I'm not sure why I picked this sport, but it gives me so much joy when I actually can ride a wave. There's this feeling of power behind you. And the way that I like to surf is like, I ask God, okay, which wave should I go for? And so it's me and him out there. It's really amazing and powerful. So at the same time, that's like the other thing that I'm trying to do to stay grounded.
Oh, fantastic. Well, we have some serious surfers in the REAP community, the Repurposing business community. And I even have a longboard sitting in the basement in Tennessee, but it has to go to South Africa because it's pretty...
There's no surf in Tennessee right now.
There's no surf in Tennessee, right? That's right. Yeah.
Right, for sure.
Yeah, quite something. Well, it's good. And so you're surfing, you're painting, you're resting, I hope.
Yeah, I'm consulting as well for another company that is working with artisans. And so I am working. I think that keeps me mentally sharp. And I think that as I'm journaling, I'm thinking about like, how do I prepare myself if I'm hibernating, and what are the things that I want to be strong in? I think that obviously like getting grounded in him and my worth, and staying creative, and also learning about, market factors and what's happening. So I'm keeping a pulse on everything. And when God says it's time to go, then I feel like at least I'm healthy and ready to go. I think those are the things that I'm trying to do to stay at least present in what's happening. So,
yeah, that's so important, because when God says go, it's not the time to start getting ready. One has to stay ready in anticipation that he will say now is the time to do something, but to be able to relax until he speaks. Right. Yeah. So this is the paradox, right? That, and it's God who speaks and initiates something, and we have to relax while he's not speaking, and otherwise we wear ourselves out, and so it's the parable of the 5 foolish virgins, as they used to call it, is now the 5 foolish millennials with their cell phone batteries. We shouldn't be wearing out our cell phone battery when we should be resting, because the big deal is still to come.
Right. Yeah. And I know, I know that there are active things that I could be doing. I could be building my resume. I could be building a website. There are a lot of those little things. I could be networking, but I don't really get the sense that that's what God wants me to do in this season to prepare. I think it's much more of an incubation period of rest. And so,
Yeah. Now, I think it's really, really important, and important not to, there's an old bumper sticker, Jesus is coming back, look busy, Right. But, versus being faithful to what he's, well, he says, I'm coming back. So will I find faith on the earth? Are you going to be faithful to what I've given you at that time, which is not us conjuring up something which isn't there right now? It's like in surfing. I mean, you can't take a wave unless a wave is there.
Absolutely. And it may not be the right wave for you as well. I think that that's the one thing I've learned about surfing is like there are different waves that you're probably going to be better at left hand, right hand, and for your skill sets. And if there's a wave that's too big for me, it's going to overwhelm me at the same time. So I'm going to believe in faith that he knows what's the right wave for me to catch and ride too. So,
Sarah, you're sounding like a regular hippie nowadays.
Well, I live in California. I like granola and kefir. So, hey.
There we go. Yeah. So to the person who's lost a business in this COVID crisis, what would you say?
That's tough. I think I have a lot of empathy because I know how much blood, sweat, and tears has gone into a business. And a lot of the factors, like no one could have planned for this, I think. And so I think that it's okay to grieve. I think that's something that I'm learning. It's okay to grieve. It's okay to look back at the good that has come out of it. As I'm grieving, this business, I'm looking back at all the good things that have happened. I think that's the one thing that I would give advice is like, look at the good that has come out of it and that there are seasons for everything. I think that it's easy to say, okay, I'm just going to leave it and let it go. But I think grieving is healthy. And to look at the impact that it's made. I think that when we announced that we were hibernating, we had so many amazing stories come back and just say, you guys have done, amazing things. We love your products. And we didn't feel this level of love until now. We're like, okay, why didn't you show us love, during these hard 10 years when we needed it? But we really felt the love. And I think to accept that love and community is just as important because that means that you've built an amazing community around you. I think that when it's like the death of, I think, a loved one as well. I think it's really hard, but to see the community that gathers around it is an indication of the impact and how it's been influential. I would recommend people to just really lean into that and just see that there was good that's come from it. And that in death, I believe that there is life as well and that there is hope. I believe that there is hope. I've learned so much in the past 10 years. It's amazing. I would not trade any of it. And so I think that the lessons are definitely something that will be carried on for whatever endeavor happens next for this person that is grieving this company. And to allow yourself to go through the stages of grief. It's okay to be angry. It's okay to be in denial. And just to walk through that. I think it's easy for us entrepreneurs just to pick ourselves back up and then move on. But I don't think that if we don't grieve healthily, it could come back, I think, eventually. So,
yeah, that's right. Yeah. My father-in-law used to say, we wait until somebody's funeral to say nice things about them. So the advantage for you is you've had a mini funeral, at least, or a grieving, which has been good to hear. And in my own father's case, he had two funerals. One was during the Second World War. There was a hospital boat that went from North Africa to Italy, and there were 6 South Africans on the boat, including 2 Johnsons, and the other 5 died. So they thought he died, so they had a funeral for him.
Wow.
Memorial service. And then they discovered later, oops, he's still alive. So it's rare that somebody gets 2 funerals, and at least you get to hear some of the good stuff while you're still alive, which is fantastic.
That's so true. Yeah, it is very true. And I'm holding on to those things and saying, this is the legacy that we've left. And there are people that is like, we're waiting for you to come back. We're like, okay, we'll see what it looks like. And so I think at least there's that vote of confidence that makes me feel good. So
excellent. Well, good for you, Sarah. Good. And thank you for sharing your story. And because it's quite a journey. I mean, it's there was a guy, Bob Mumford, used to be in the Bay Area, the North Bay, who said there's nothing quite so dangerous as a string of unbroken success. And because we begin to believe our own press, our own advertising, do stuff, and there's, we lose the humility that we need. Absolutely. And having these blips along the way that remind us of our humanity, our dependence upon God, And the fact that we can hear God and end up in trouble, is sobering.
Mm-hmm.
And yet it reminds us that he is God and we are not. So, and I think that this whole coronavirus crisis has been a reset in many respects for many people. And so I commend you for the way that you've walked through it, that you've gone through the challenges, and blessings on your season of rest. And whatever the future holds, we'll wait and see, but we stand in hope with you.
Thank you. I really look forward to it. Thank you, Brett. I am so grateful for the REAP community and for everybody that has gathered around us and prayed for us. I think that just hearing stories of other entrepreneurs and business owners has always kept me hopeful. I always go back to some of our earlier REAP days, and I think that community there has always helped us to stay true to what we're called to. So yeah, very grateful for you and Lynn.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Thank you, Sarah. Thank you for being on this podcast. And we look forward to the next chapter.
Sounds great. Looking forward to it.